Hello, Internet. My name is John Kulas. I am a 20-year professor of industrial and organizational psychology. I'm a 10-year user of R for statistical applications, and for the last 6 or 7 years, I've also been using R to author things like academic papers and slide presentations and feedback reports and technical reports. Um, and so every week I get together with some collaborators on different projects. And we just hold these what are called open office hours, where we're just here for an hour, maybe a little over an hour. And we're available if anyone stumbles across us and has any questions regarding how to use R as an authoring platform. How do you create a paper? How do you make a website? How do you do a book? How do you do a presentation? All that kind of stuff. And so we haven't had a lot of people pop by and ask us questions. So in the meantime, what we've been doing is we've been focusing on kind of a feature topic. And so again, if someone does stumble across this and has a question, please do ask in the comments or in the chat. Um, but absent that, what we'll be doing is we'll focus on an aspect of R's authoring capabilities that maybe we just want to take a deeper dive at or a closer look at. And for the last few weeks, what we've been looking at are interactive elements within R documents. And so these interactive elements are going to be facilitated by rendering to an HTML type file. And we've limited ourselves to non-shiny interactive elements. And we've discussed on this channel and on these weekly sessions, we've discussed the difference between shiny interactive elements and these non-shiny interactive elements. And we keep going back to it, but shiny really is kind of a language in and of itself. So we do have some tutorials and some resources that we've done in the past to help navigate shiny documents. But there's also these helper packages that exist wherein we don't need to fully use Shiny. We can actually use functions that other people have written that facilitate interactivity without needing Shiny. And that's kind of neat. So we've been looking into these packages that facilitate interactivity for the last 4 weeks, I think, the 4 previous weeks, we looked at some of these packages. And tonight, what I thought we would do is we would take a deeper dive at kind of the fundamental foundational package that facilitates the four packages that we looked at the previous 4 weeks. We looked at dy graphs, plotly, leaflet, and what was the fourth? Well, I have a slide on it. We'll take a look. But each of these packages that can be rendered to an HTML file and enable some element or some aspect of interactivity, each of these is facilitated through this foundational package called HTML widgets. And my introduction to HTML widgets was years and years ago when I was creating a website, probably one of the first authoring things I tried to do and share that other people could see. I was working on a website and I was trying to get a interactive leaflet map to render within a container that I had controlled. And so HTML widgets at the time they had, and I think they still do. We'll take a look at this deeper tonight. But they had some capabilities in there of kind of controlling the size of the element that you're creating. And that's something that we'll see on these subsequent slides here. As always, the slide deck is linked in the chat if you want to check out these slides. But I think we're going to take a deeper dive into HTML widgets, the package itself, and see if we can pull some functions that help us exhibit a little more control over the interactive plots and elements that we're actually rendering. Every week, because this exploration is just kind of by the seat of our pants, every week we'll also try to take a look back at what we did the previous week, our feature from the previous week, and we'll try to present that in a more digestible, linear format that's maybe a little more conducive and suitable for learning. And so let's go ahead and do that now. We'll get our transition in here.
Well, Rocky and Bullwinkle's dream of getting a mooseberry bush has turned into a nightmare, for they have at last run into that legendary figure of mountain lore, the abominable snowman.
Is he following us, Bullwinkle?
I'm not even going to turn around to find out.
Even Boris Badenov, who thought he had made up the snowman out of sheer make-believe, had to admit that there was such a thing.
But Boris, a live man-eating snowman, such a thing couldn't be.
You give me couldn't be, he give me is.
And as the four fleeing figures scrambled over the ice, the snowman steadily gained on them.
Wait, hold up.
What is it, Sir Hillary?
There's only one way for any of us to escape.
What's that?
Somebody's got to stay here and fight it out with snowmen. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How's about you staying? That don't make no sense at all.
Whatever we do, we better do fast. He'll be here in a minute.
Uh-oh. It's coming in a minute. So last week when we last left our heroes, Diego and I were taking a look at dy graphs. And dy graphs, it's kind of a neat package. I had a lot of fun with it because we were introduced to a new type of object within R that I was not familiar with, and I kept kind of getting excited about it. But that object is a time series object, and so the time series function here that you see TS on line 10, this is coming from the stats package. Now, this is not something you need to load into your working session when you're using R or R Markdown or Quarto or however you're interacting with the program R, which ultimately we do need. You don't need to load that library because even though it's in a package, stats, it's such a fundamental foundational package that it always comes loaded into your R session. And so the time series object was, and you can go back last week and take a look. I don't know if that's something we'll snip because it's very, it seems like a very niche kind of application. But the TS object is really neat because, and we were kind of awestruck or dumbfounded or didn't really understand what was going on when we first started playing with this, because the TS object itself doesn't have any date identifiers in the object. So that is, I'm a psychologist and we're used to organizing our data such that we have variable information in columns and person, because we're psychologists, so person information in rows. And when we deal with data, which we do, we'll just save that as a variable. You can save it as a date variable. You can save it as a numeric variable. It doesn't really matter. It's in there as a variable. Now these time series data objects, what one of the things they do is they're assuming that the data that you have is organized in some meaningful time-related sequence. And so we just created here, we have what, 1, 2, 3, 7, 10. We have, if you look on lines 3 and 6, the debate was last Tuesday, so we just kind of made up some fake data with the debate participants. And so we have 10 pieces of information there. And again, those numbers are, there's no context, there's no real meaning to it. We just wanted to give ourselves some data that we could chart and play with. And so what those numbers there do, if we look at line 11, we're just creating two vectors and then binding them, the columns together, and not calling out a data frame, not having anything else in there other than those 10 numbers. So two columns with 10 numbers. Now, those two columns with 10 numbers, it's important if we're going to feed that into a time series object, it's important to actually be very careful about the sequencing of those numbers. So if we look at the Harris data, 10 has to come before 8, 8 has to come before 14, and those numbers need to match on the second variable. So 8 and 10 need to have some linkage in terms of date. Now this is something that I'm still not fully comfortable with because I kind of have a maybe it's unhealthy, but a a a rigorous adherence to making sure that the data has integrity and it's well defined, and I'm fully aware of what that data is linked with and associated with. But with this time series information, we don't have that in the data set itself. What we actually do have, and this comment here is linked, that it's in a different color because I took this from the help page of either, I probably took it from the help page. Well, I guess we can click it and see where I took it from because I don't remember. Yeah, so it's the help page for the time series objects themselves and the creation of those time series objects. And so what they're actually doing, rather than being fully responsive to someone like me who wants to look at a data object and see everything linked across columns but within rows, such that I know that one piece of information has an association with another piece of information. What they're trying to do here, and again, I'm not fully comfortable with it yet, but I still think it's pretty neat, is they're actually saying the sequence within which you organize your data, that's going to be meaningful in relation to some time information. And the time information that they're assuming that you organize your data with is monthly or quarterly, or it can be daily. And so you see numbers here in the hyperlinked help. If you access the slides, you see things like 7 and 12 and 4. And those are referencing the time sequence that your data is naturally falling in. And so when we have our 10, 8, 14, 6, 9, 12, 15, 12, 7, and 13 for Harris, those are, what did I say, 10 numbers there. We can also tell the time series function what we want those numbers to be, those different rows, those different numbers to be interpreted as. And when I say frequency equals 12, what we're telling the time series function is that I'm giving you month information. So what you're seeing is going to be the first month, the second month, the third month. And you can see where someone like a psychologist might get a little uncomfortable with that when there's no linking of explicit dates. When I also, in this second variable, have first month, second month, and third month. And those, it's super important that those link up. As long as they do link up and are associated with each other, then we can go ahead and say not only what those numbers represent in terms of the amount of time that passes between those numbers being retrieved or recorded or stored, but we can also say when to start, and the when to start is on line 13 here. Because we have month data, what we said was go ahead and start in the year 2023 and give me the first month. And so we played around with this a little bit in terms of sequencing, but that first month would be January. And you do see that rendered here on this plot. Now, one of the things, and we're going to play with HTML widgets, and we're going to see if we can alter this a little bit. But it looks like maybe it's picking up the wrong year. It's not. It's just picking up the first two digits of the year. So that's 2000 and then 23 is cut off. You can see that a little easier with February where we're getting a little bit of the two. But theoretically with HTML widgets, when we go in there and look at some of their helper functions, we should be able to alter this a little bit so that we don't get the overplotting and or the truncation that we actually see here, which is more accurate in terms of what's happening. Now, if we go to the right of this graph, you can see one of the built-in features of dy graphs is it has this key up here, kind of like a legend, but the legend populates itself based on where your cursor is, and where your cursor is relative to the data that's reflected here in terms of the two pieces of information you have. Now you see it's actually pulling in three pieces of information. It's pulling in the Harris number, the Trump number, and then it's pulling in the month and year as well. The easiest place to see this is probably if we go ahead and take a look at the first months. However, if we look at the first months right now, the way that this is rendered on this page, we're not able to see the legend. So let's take a look at the last ones, which are probably also easy to identify. So we have Harris 13, Trump 12. And then if we start our sequence in the year 2023 in January, then I have January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. So we're expecting this number to be October. And so you see September rendered here. You don't see, I guess that it is in the legend, but it's not on the x-axis in terms of the plotting. And again, we're gonna take a look at HTML widgets, and maybe we'll just play with this graph and see if we can get this graph to render in a way that we want it to. But you see the information conveyed there in the upper right. So the Harris number and the Trump number. We didn't play with colors. I'm sure we could do that as well within the dy graphs package, but we just wanted to keep the actual commands fairly short. And you can see there's a lot of power in this just very simple function. This is a function that only needs, in this particular case, it only needs one object fed into it. And that object is a time series object that we create here on line 10. So dy graphs, they were kind of fun. I guess there is a link here if you're interested in learning more about those and playing with those. Again, as psychologists, it's not something that I envision using all that frequently, but it's just a little more exhaustive with regard to these non-shiny, interactive type visuals that we can render within these documents that we author when we use R as an authoring platform. And every week that we've been looking at these four, I mentioned earlier that we looked at 4 different packages, and there's one that I couldn't remember. I guess the one that I couldn't remember was 3JS. But I've been just putting a different plot in here each week to see the kinds of, I don't know, pretty visuals that you can do with each of these different packages. This is Plotly. Again, the organization of this information and the presentation of this information, the context within which I'm familiar with something like this would be a scatter plot across 3 different variables, and we've done that for a few different projects, and as long as you have a meaningful correlation, then these scatter plots end up looking nice. This is 3-dimensional information for I'm not sure what the data even is reflecting. I just kind of grabbed it and plotted it. It looks like Mount Bruno. So to full transparency, I probably should have put hyperlinks to each of the sources for these plots to give the authors a little more credit. What I've been doing in practice is I've only been kind of hyperlinking stuff that I found particularly useful to help navigate these different things. So there's a there's a link to a leaflet resource there. We've spent so much time on Plotly that I didn't actually link to a resource, but in previous weeks there are resources. Here again, you see the feature that I wanted to, and every week we did a little different feature on these different packages. But what I was hoping to highlight with Leaflet that we hadn't looked at before was this layer here of the type of map. And so we have those provider tiles that are just out there and very easy to access. It's also very easy to allow the user to exert some level of control over how their map looks, right? So we're all familiar with this in terms of map functions that you use on your phone or on the internet in terms of, do I want a satellite image? Do I want a road enabled image? Let's get our co-host in here.
Vamos a ver, ¿qué es lo que pasa con los alcaldes? ¿Qué es lo que pasa con los alcaldes? ¿Qué es lo que sí, qué está pasando con los alcaldes?
Hey, hello.
Hey, Diego. So just a heads up, my internet again, and I'm having more internet issues. This was kind of a really disruptive week for me, so I actually didn't get to attend to my internet stuff like I was hoping I would be able to. So anyway, the reason I mention that is if I get really choppy, Diego, you might want to take over. But we were just going over kind of some of the, again, for the last time, hopefully, or for the last time in a while, I think we're going over some of these non-shiny interactive capabilities that these existing packages have. And the one feature that, a new feature that we hadn't gone over, but that I incorporated into this week's kind of example of a leaflet map was these layers. So these tiles here in the upper right, you can see this legend, and the user can select how they want this information actually rendered. There's different, you can put as many on here as you want. If they get to be too many, you can even change this from a radial button into something like a pull down menu. And then Diego, the thing I was thinking that we work on tonight is taking a look at the htmlwidgets package and seeing if we can exert a little more control over the way in which, sorry, I said I was going to disable that mouse wheel, and then I forgot to do it. But to see if we can exert a little more control over how these images are rendered such that, for example, in this particular plot, the user doesn't need to drag that bar on the bottom to go from, in and out on the zoom to the, doggone it, mouse wheel, to the layer in terms of, it'd be nice if that was all displayed in the same window. And I think we should be able to do that if we get a little more fancy with htmlwidgets. Now, there's a hyperlink in here, and we're going to see it in a second. We can take a look at some more examples of the types of objects that you can render with these different packages. Again, you might need to refresh your browser depending on, I'm using Edge, Microsoft Edge. But you may need to refresh your browser in order to really get the full functionality out of these. I don't know what this is. Again, it looks like a Calder mobile kind of almost with the colors anyway. And then our dy graphs object, again, we played around with that a lot last week. They're canned data sets that are kind of gruesome. It's lung cancer, I think, deaths. And theirs are going from the 70s up to, I guess they're in the 70s, it looks like their data is. One thing that we found that was kind of fun was, interesting, I guess, was because we play with things like fonts when we craft these slides. I found a Google font that looked like it was appropriate for dy graphs, and it's kind of pixelated here. And we didn't expect this to happen. And I didn't specify this, I didn't ask for it, but if you look at the dy graphs, the information that's actually being displayed, it's in that it's in that same font.
Game Boy font.
Is that what it is? Game Boy? Kind of looks like it, doesn't it? Okay, so those are the interactive packages that we played with. These aren't exhaustive. There's more that could be used. but these are ones that have quite a bit of documentation, specifically within the Quarto site. And so we thought we'd at least take a look at them. And tonight, what we want to do is we want to take a look at the HTML widgets package itself. And the aspect of it, I think, that we want to probably play with is the sizing of those widgets. Now, widget is being used in kind of a technical sense here. The thing that we create using R, and if we look at the R script that we use to create these objects, some of the, and again, this is hidden. These are all available if anyone wants these, but we actually didn't provide the code for these like we did with the DY graph, just because we were more interested in seeing different examples of things that could be plotted. Now, Diego, you're going to be happy because I put a Python chunk in here.
Yeah, I
So,
see. And the interactive, the the one that you put on the slide deck also takes you to Python code for one of the maps.
oh, does it? The leaflet does it? I might have, uh, yeah, and so, that's a good point too because it's the helper pages that we're finding for these things that we're trying to do. It's nice that Quarto as an authoring platform is accommodating to different programming languages, but we're also seeing a conflation of the helper pages. And so, you do need some level of experience or exposure to R as well as Python in order to kind of navigate it and even just tell, oh, this, this isn't R code. This isn't what I'm looking for. This is Python. Yeah, so there might be a couple of links to, even though this weekly session is focused on R, there are times where we might just grab some code, and because we can within Quarto, we might just run a Python chunk. And so I forget why I wanted to look at this now. It escapes me. I'm sorry. So we'll go ahead and, I know. I wanted to mention that these are widgets. The things that we're creating are widgets. Now we've been occasionally calling these things objects, and occasionally just, especially when we use piping conventions, we'll actually not create an object, but we'll just poof an object. So regardless
Prophetic
of whether
assistance.
regardless of whether we assign an object to our local environment or whether we just poof into the document, we call those things the widgets. So they're widgets that are rendered on an HTML document. How am I holding up in terms of internet, Diego?
No, you're doing good. No,
Okay.
no interference.
Do you want to play around with this, or do you want me to script tonight? You have a preference?
You can play with it. Or I can if you want, but I might have to leave early.
Oh, okay, that's fine. I will then. Um, I think maybe what we'll do is, and again, I haven't vetted this. I haven't really looked all that carefully at it, but in my mind, I'm thinking about old ways in which I used this information to render interactive objects in a format that was amenable to what I actually wanted. And so create widget is done within these packages. So we don't need necessarily to use create widget because each of these packages, Plotly, DYGraphs, 3JS, they're creating widgets themselves too. Um, but uh, but there might be some options within that create widget function that we might want to exert more control over. So here we see, for example, sizing policy. So I'm wondering, excuse me. So I'm wondering maybe if we just, maybe we should just go in there and play with this and see what we actually get. So I'm going to, this looks like our code. And again, so with these helper, uh, these helper pages are great. But even on the same page, we're actually seeing kind of a mixture of languages that are being used. So here's some JavaScript, uh, directly doing the same thing that we're going to try to do with R. It looks like the dy graphs syntax itself has a way to do the same thing, and that syntax is going to be different than the R package, I'm assuming, that enables dy graphs. So let's stay simple here, and let's just see if we can copy what looks to us like our code here, and we'll see if that does anything to our objects. I think I'm gonna, Diego, do you have preference here? Do you want to, does any of these three things speak to you? Oh, look at this, now they're not rendering.
Maybe the digraphs.
But we just, okay, we
No,
can
no,
do
no.
that. Do you,
I mean 3GS, the balls, the little colorful balls.
you like these guys?
Well, I'm mostly
All right.
curious about what they are. They look like that. Right.
I don't know. I I was just running out of examples, so I pulled this one that I found that we hadn't done. Okay, we can use this. And let's do that. So I'm gonna grab that as long as it's in R. Yep, that's R. So I'm gonna grab this whole chunk and we'll put it into a fresh document here. So we'll create a new
Because
Quarto document.
I can see using one of these widgets to do something like those graphical EFAs that we talked about, or a nomenological network, or some other psychological thing. But with the
Yeah.
maps and the digraphs, that's more like for people in like finance or doing things about geography, like doing geolocation research and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Although, I've been working with a friend trying to get some commercial work in a different area, and we've been doing all GIS stuff. So we've been doing data. Uh, we've been doing dashboardy kinds of things that the information is packaged within geographic locations, which has been kind of fun. So
Hmm.
it's not something that you and I traditionally would do, but it's not that far away from just dealing with data and trying to give people data in a package that they can digest. And so the map data, if you have information that's geographically dispersed, it's kind of neat playing with that. I've had a lot of fun with it, actually. We'll just save it in the live stream, I guess. What the heck? And I'm calling it Calder because there's and it doesn't look like a Calder mobile really, but there are, it was in the 70s, I think. It's a famous artist, and that artist had the colors are what's reminding me of Calder, not the shapes, but the colors. Have you ever seen these, Diego? There was a museum in Manhattan, I know, that I think
Yeah,
Ian and I went to. This one, I guess, maybe kind of looks like it.
I think you mentioned it before. The artist.
Okay. Yeah, if you like find one of these in your grandparents' attic, make sure to not throw it away. They're worth like, I don't know, $1 million or something crazy. Code seems to work, so let's go ahead and now that we know it works, we'll get rid of it. We'll just keep one of these chunks. Rather replace it. I mean, with the 3JS that we're trying to reproduce. Now, we saw the 3JS object in a reveal slide deck, but it should render also within just non-slide non-slide HTML file. We're actually getting a little more information. Did you see that something pop there upon hover, Diego? Did you see those black letters?
Nope.
I thought
I
I
was
saw some black letters pop up when I first came in here. Woo! Oh, now it looks like a Calder mobile if you go like this. So let me refresh this again and see what it comes in like. So it comes in oriented that way. I mean, we could change its orientation within the 3JS package with zoom, and we could change the camera angle. Oh, there we go. Something did just flash. Wonder what that was. That's the other thing about having a bad internet is I'm not sure I can reproduce what there. What is going on? I guess we should have read the documentation a little more carefully here on this. But what does it say? Vixen? Again, I know you want to know what the data is. I think. Oh, Valjean. I think this is more Les Mis data. Remember we did one of these with Les Miserables characters and whether they knew each other. Do you remember that? You were here, I think, for that, weren't you, Diego?
Uh, Maybe I forgot.
Maybe. Yeah, be non-committal about that. Let's go ahead and get rid of. We'll get rid of the code, so we don't need to echo, and we'll get rid of the warnings. So we'll set echo to false. We'll do warning. Uh-oh. I don't like it when it doesn't auto give me these comments. It makes me think that maybe I'm doing something wrong. Or maybe that's just within reveal presentations that it auto-populates. So there we go. And we're seeing it's called Calder, not because it is, but because we called the document that. And we're actually seeing the orientation that's coming in. Now I mentioned we can change that orientation in Three.js through the camera angle, but we should also be able to change it within HTML widgets. I think what I'd like to do here maybe is see if we can do something about these slides. And now to me, these slides are going to be maybe do something about these slides, these vertical and horizontal. Like, I call them right. I don't know what are these called. These little clicky and grabby things. Is that the technical term, clicky and grabby?
Hmm.
What are these called in Spanish?
The cauldrons.
No, the on the bottom here, the arrows that let me navigate this, go left and right.
The slider.
Let me slider. There you go. Let me put the map on here because the map that slider is a little easier to see, I think. So we'll put two chunks in here and then maybe play with both of them. Even though it says call there, we're gonna put in another chunk, and that other chunk is gonna doggone it! I forgot to turn off my echo. We'll see if that's okay. There we go. Okay, sweet. So okay, so interesting. So we're seeing here that we probably don't need to play with this because the problem we were having in our slide deck is not a problem here. We're not getting the sliders. So the sliders aren't showing up here. So if we go over this week, I know, Diego, you said you might not be able to do a full session this week. But if we go over this week, I think maybe what we'll do is we'll see if we can apply whatever solution we come up with tonight. We'll see if we can apply that in the slide deck to limit sliders. Boy, lots of the word slider is being used tonight more than it's ever been used by you or I.
It's like we're doing a commercial for White Castle.
Oh, White Castle. Do you like White Castle burgers?
Oh no, I hate them.
You hate them? That's strong. Why?
Well, they're terrible.
Because they're Well, they're steamed, right? I mean, that's an odd way to cook a hamburger.
I don't know. It's just it's very sensitive to talk about it in public.
Why?
They're worse than Taco Bell.
I see. Okay. So you like how they affect you. You don't, it's not necessarily the size, the taste.
And also the taste. I mean, the bread is pretty bad and just everything. It's like eating microwave food.
I don't think I've had I don't think I've had a White Castle for, I don't know, 10 years or so. All I remember is that they give you little chopped up onions on them, and then you have like a million of them. You can't just have one or two. You have to have like five. Um, so the only thing I did here so far was I don't know if we did that or someone else did, but there was open and close parenthesis around this entire line 43 specification of graph.js here, and I don't know why. I think what we want to do is we want to assign this to an object, so we'll call it Calder, I guess, since we're going with that theme. And I would have to run the whole chunk to get that because when we're in these authoring documents, your environment isn't necessarily populated. When you render the entire document, you need to go chunk by chunk if you want that to happen. So we're actually asking for Calder here. Let's do an eval false on this for now. We don't need this here. And we shouldn't get our plot either because we're not calling it up. We're just assigning it to an object. It's a list. Now if we say Calder on line 45, now we should get it to come up. And that Calder, now that we created an object, that should be something that we can manipulate with our HTML widgets functions. So I'm going to see if we can get rid of these sliders that are not steamed. Not steamed sliders. So let's take a look at this thing here. Now, Sigma, we haven't read the documentation. I'm just assuming that Sigma isn't on. Let's take a quick look here and see if they create Sigma somewhere. What kind of widget is it? Sizing, policy. I think that's what we want. I wonder if we can just. Oh, sizing policy is in here. Wow, that's a lot. I don't know if we're gonna get this to work immediately. Let's just do a create widget here, see if we can get it to work. And we already have HTML widgets loaded, don't we? We don't. So we are going to actually use the double colon notation to specify that package because we're not explicitly loading it into our environment. And then let's see. It looks like sizing policy is its own kind of thing within here. And I'm not even sure I'm on the right space. I'm at the right spot. It's really odd that this is in double quotes. Why is that in double quotes? Like this should be our object, right? X should be Calder.
Yeah, and Sigma. What is Sigma?
Oh,
Does it
Sigma
have?
is probably the name of the thing we're creating, I would imagine. So let's actually get rid of this for now and see if this works. Let's see if we created anything in our folder here. I don't see any Sigma. So let's actually call up Calder and call up Sigma. See if we get anything. And one of these days, Diego, we're gonna have to start reading documentation. I developed
It's
like
never
a.
gonna happen.
You don't think it'll ever happen? Oh, method. Sigma is the method.
Does it have a question marks, HTML widget, and create widget? No, doesn't seem.
It
Oh, there it
says
is. name. Yeah, that's just sigma can be anything you want.
Oh, but it says should match the base name of the YAML and JavaScript files used to implement. Now, is that gonna be something that we need to worry about? All right, the sizing policy I think is what I'm interested in. But let's see if we can get the width and the height here. Um, and we'll see what those are. Probably px or m, I'm guessing, in CSS units. Yeah, so that should be. Let's just try to put a number in there and see if it makes us specify. Um, see if it makes us. Now I wonder. What if we assign this? I think we might need to assign that to an object and then do some further wrapping before we call it out. Yeah, because we're not getting anything there. So what if we do graph? Let's see if we get anything off of that. We might have to do some more messing around with that create widget. Or we might be in the wrong area, actually. It might not be create widget that we actually need. It might be something else. So I think I lost. Did I close out of that helper page? I think I closed out of the helper page. The HTML file that I had. So that's unfortunate. Sizing policy, yeah, we're going to need that. Then the other thing that we're going to need is we're going to need to figure out, we're going to need to figure out how to get that object once we size it as a widget, once we actually, how do we get it to render within the document?
Well, I should get
Okay.
going. I have to go to Walgreens to get some pictures and frames to put in my office of Mealy.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely important. Next week, Diego, you're saying maybe if I don't if I don't get these objects to render like I want them to this week, we might take a look at this next week, but you were also thinking maybe that parallax, right?
Oh yeah, parallax scrolling.
Is there anything else you want to take a look at for a feature?
I think that would be enough for now.
Okay.
Because that's kind of hard to implement, I think. Because for Quartobook, it doesn't work, for example.
Okay, cool. That's perfect. We can try to get it to work then.
Yep. Well, see you later.
Okay,
Bye.
see you, Diego. So I think I am going to spend just a little more time on here and seeing if we can get our object to render within the space that we actually want. No, that's not going to work. I think since Diego left and since we're probably gonna have to do a little more exploration here in terms of the specific articulation of these HTML widget functions that we want in order to control it, I think we can just call it early tonight. So I'm gonna call it, and next week, I think what we'll do is next week we will revisit this probably quickly because we'll come up with a quick solution on resizing. And then we'll take a look at that parallax as well. So parallax, I'm not sure what that does. Diego was interested in it. And I know he's writing a book, so we should hear about Diego's book. I think he might have run into a little bit of an obstacle in trying to implement parallax within his book. So that'll be a good place to start, and then we can try to problem solve it. All right, so next week we'll return to this, and then we'll do parallax.